Yesterday I introduced the founding prophets, went through their history as fast as I could, fairly mechanically. Today what I'd like to do is to discuss the perspective that the Baha'i faith offers on religion itself and human civilization. I want to invite you for a minute or two to go through this defining framework that comes from Baha'i holy writings. The purpose of divine messengers and the revelation of the heavenly books and the establishment of the religion of God has been no other than to create amity and justice between the children of the races. True religion is the foundation of a spiritual union, the union of thought, the union of susceptibilities, the unity of customs and the ideal chain binding together all the children of men. Through its practical realization, the minds and souls will receive development by divine instruction. They will become assisted to investigate reality, attain to a lofty station of wisdom, and establish the basis of a divine civilization. Now it is quite clear that the insights offered in this text could not be more far from what we observe around ourselves, no matter in which corner of the earth we are. Because religion has become synonymous with tension, confrontation, killing, invasion, brutality, fundamentalism, and destruction, many a times, destruction of amity among children of men. Whereas the Baha'i faith offers a completely, almost 180 degrees diametrically opposed to what true religion should be and how we should understand religion. It's really in this context that the purpose of religion and its impact on human civilization is what I find it exciting, and I'd like to share some thoughts on it. You would have noticed that in this text already, as it frames the issue, the Baha'i faith defines religion and not religions. And that's a very central point of what I'm going to discuss in this session. It relates to an insight that the Baha'i writings offer, and the Bab, one of the twin founders of the Baha'i faith, has written volumes on the unity of reality, the singleness of reality. Reality has different perspectives depending on how we understand who we are and how we fit in the so-called universe or multiverse. Is reality what we feel, the material side of us, the spiritual side of us, how the two interact, interrelate, and how do we locate ourselves as a spiritual beings in this reality in which we operate? So the implications of progressive revelation, which is one of the fundamental insights that the Baha'i faith offers in this dispensation, bearing in mind that, as I mentioned yesterday very briefly, the claim that the Bab made is that his revelation, his pronouncement, or his claim, if you like, was the end of a cycle of human consciousness and the beginning of a new cycle, which will last thousands of years, possibly as long as 500,000 years. And in this cycle, our understanding as human beings, as a spiritual beings, will evolve to a different level. And the longer and the deeper and the wider our spiritual consciousness evolves, so will become our impact on our surroundings. the way we will define our physical, or if you like, material existence. Because we have a material existence and we have spiritual existence. And these two are not separable, however much religious leaders in the past cycles have attempted to separate the two. That this is your physical being and this is your spiritual being. The Bab says the two are inseparable unity. Any attempt to separate the two, any attempt to put a divide for whatever reason between our physical reality and our spiritual reality is actually mutilating an existence that cannot be separated. And if we do it, we are now corrupting the religion of God. We are not benefiting from it. We are turning it into a factor of confusion, a cause of division, and a source of enmity, not amity. So it's very fundamental in Baha'i writings that we should not separate this, and we should in fact find religion as the source of insight into the reality in which we as a spiritual beings should function. So the notion of progressive revelation in essence suggests that there is God as a source of being and the mechanism through which, the portals via which insights, spiritual nourishment, if you prefer, guidance, and principles are conveyed to humanity, go through successive phases, successive revelations, successive manifestations. And in fact, the Baha'i scriptures offers a new terminology. It doesn't favor the use of prophets or messengers of God, although it uses it very frequently. It prefers to use the term manifestation of God, meaning Christ, Moses, Krishna, Buddha, Prophet Muhammad, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and whoever comes after them are in fact manifestations of divine reality, manifesting attributes of God, whatever we call him or her. In fact, in the Baha'i writings, in the text, there is no him or her for God. Although English has got limitations. So I'm going to be using him and her, and with your permission, use the English tradition or convention of him when they can't say him and her. But that's because I want to pay respect to the medium of communication, not because I believe that the creator is either him or her. And that's an important notion that there aren't many religions as we have made them to become. As if Judaism is different from Christianity, or Buddhism is different from Islam, or Islam is different, comes from a different source. If there is indeed one God that we all believe in, and that God has inspired or sent these different messengers, the Baha'i scriptures insight is there's only one religion that has been revealed to us, communicated to us in successive chapters, much like as we go to school. We start from wherever we start, and we end up wherever we end. The fact that we go to grade 1 and nursery school and grade 2 and sometimes become a university and sometimes becomes masters and sometimes become doctorate and postdoctorate, and it goes on and on and on, it does not mean that there is various sources of knowledge. It does mean that we grow from where we begin to be able to absorb more and more complex issues. Cosmos is what cosmos is. Universe is what the universe is. Our understanding of it deepens and widens and becomes more mature, not because the universe has become more mature, because we have become more capable of absorbing more complex issues, be it of mathematical nature, be it of universal nature, be it of literature and poetry and art and music and everything else that comes, that makes us who we are, because we become more capable of absorbing. And as we become more capable, the next manifestation of God, the next divine teacher, manifests more complex attributes of the Creator. And this notion of progressive revelation then suggests that this notion that we have worldwide come to believe that there are many religions, some of them superior, some of them are less so, and so on, is nothing other than figmentation of the imaginations of some religious leaders who, out of the feebleness of their existence, have made religion a means of making money, controlling power. And Baha'u'llah, in his own time, wrote a book called the Book of Certitude, in which he defined very clearly. It's a book of about 289, or call it 300 pages, in which he was very clear that religion has become a means of division, a means of controlling the public power, and has become a source of corrupting the message of God, not elaborating and making it a source of amity, enlightenment, and creativity. And because remember, one of the attributes of God is the Creator. So the Word of God, if nothing else, it should be able to generate creativity in each one of us. But look at religions as we know them. They try to suppress creativity. They try to suppress questioning. They try to put label on you whenever you ask a simple question. Because it touches the power base, the economic interest or a material interest of some or other so-called religious establishment. So the notion of progressive revelation is fundamental and has got profound implications for our understanding of religion and its impact on ourselves as human beings, our society, and our civilization. Interreligious tensions also disappears the minute that we reconceptualize the notion of religion. For example, if we see, and this is a very elementary but very powerful means of, if there is a God and humanity, all of us, wherever we are, if manifestations of God, or as we know them, prophets of God, are the portals of bringing attributes of God to humanity, there has been many, many prophets in the past. We have no record of, thousands upon thousands. But we've heard of Abraham, we have records of Moses, we have more records of Jesus, and we have even more records of Muhammad, and we have more records, because as we have developed technology and we have managed to record some evidences of them, either oral or written, we have more evidence that these manifestations of God, or these messengers of God, were the source of bringing guidance from God to humanity. But they're all chapters of the same revelation. They are the same they are all manifestations of the same reality, God. We don't understand them. We will never, as human beings, understand or be in a position to understand the essence of God, but we will always, in our own nano as well as in our collective way, we will be able to feel, understand the manifestations of attributes of God. For example, we will always understand a bit of God in kindness, in creativity, in amity, and sympathy, insofar as each one of us has got some of those, have we not? So the perfect manifestations of those attributes are demonstrated in these beings, Baha'u'llah says. We all have kindness, but our kindness is limited to our own limitations, is confined to our own capabilities. We have creativity, we have sympathy, we have love. But our love is confined, limited to our own capability, whereas the love that Christ manifests is boundless. The wisdom that Prophet Muhammad offers is not confined by any human limitations. The wisdom that Moses offers is a true manifestation of divine wisdom, and any other attributes that we want to focus on. So these manifestations of God are really a being of their own type. Although they look like human beings, although they have the body of human beings, their souls of a particular category that is capable of manifesting attributes of God, much like a perfect mirror. That when you put it in front of the sun, you see the perfect glory of the sun itself. So Christ, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, and many, many thousands of other prophets who we do not know of because the records have been wiped out, are in fact perfect mirrors that reflect the attributes of God. And they are become the source of guidance, enlightenment, creativity. They generate and strengthen our imagination. And us as human beings, as the recipients of these attributes, we become, by virtue of being recipients of those attributes, we in turn generate our own creativity. We discover truth. We discover elements of a reality that is out there. But progressively as we grow and our consciousness grows and our intellectual capability expands by means of the revelations of these manifestations of God, we then create more. We ask more fundamental questions. And by asking those more profound questions, we discover more of the reality within which we live. Because if you think about none of the stuff that we have invented or discovered, we have created the essence of it. We have discovered the functionality of it. An apple falls, Newton asks a question in his mind. He says, why did it fall? End of it, we discover gravity. But we don't create gravity. Gravity was there before Newton, was there after Newton. Am I right? And in many, many other ways. Cell phone industry, communication, the waves, where existed. The fact that a scientist asked the right question and another scientist criticized him or her, and they got going intellectually and they battled it out and they discovered what they discovered. Waves were always there. The difference is that by expanding our consciousness, by recognizing the creativity within ourselves, we then ask more complex questions. And by asking more complex questions, we interact with our spiritual entity, which in itself is a part of a bigger reality, divine in nature, capable of interacting with our physical reality. And Baha'u'llah says that this is the unique attribute of human beings. Human beings have evolved from childhood of ignorance and limited consciousness to adulthood of broader and widening consciousness, but all along these millions of years, we have always been a spiritual being. So our evolution is true, it's a fact. But this evolution is evolution of the essence that has always been within us as human beings. And religion plays that role. Religion has been and will continue to be that portal that transmits, if you prefer, the capabilities of the Creator in us. And by transmitting it to the degree to which we absorb and internalize it, we transform ourselves as beings. We deepen and strengthen our spiritual side that interplays with our intellectual side, which then discovers more and more, and the more we absorb, like a sponge that expands is capable of absorbing more. And that is the role that religion plays in our existence. Importantly, Baha'u'llah says, this role, this interplay of the manifestations of the attributes of the Creator into us as human beings who are essentially spiritual beings has a very fundamental attribute, and that is a question of choice. Yes?
Are you saying human beings are fundamentally different from other creatures, other animals?
Fundamentally,
The spiritual nature.
Insofar as human beings are uniquely spiritual, meaning, it doesn't mean that other beings are not spiritual, but our spirituality has got the capacity to interplay with the source through the manifestations of God and expands its consciousness. Whereas a flower is a flower, it's spiritual in creation. A dog, a bird.
I'm really wondering about evolution, and at what point human beings became spiritual in the sense that you're now talking about it, whether it suddenly switched on or...
From the beginning, Baha'u'llah says...
so when we were crawling around in the mud as fish, we were still spiritual?
If we were a unicell creature crawling in the algae of the oceans, if there was a Big Bang happened and we crawled out of the oceans like a cell, even in that form, we differed from other forms of algae insofar as we had the spirit. Although that spirit might have been a very undeveloped, basic, or a seed that was capable of growing bigger.
And is that something that's in the manifestations of God in their writing, or is that your interpretation?
No, this one luckily is in the Holy Writings, and in fact, I mentioned yesterday Abdul Baha, which was the successor of Baha'u'llah, by the virtue and the power of the will and testament of Baha'u'llah. In his Paris talks, which is a series of lectures that he did at universities and societies in Paris, he addressed this issue that in fact human beings have always been spiritual beings. And in a very prominent and lengthy letter or tablet that Abdul Baha wrote to Professor Augusto Forel, he articulates. Professor Forel was an atheist who believed in evolution and also believed in did not believe in God in the sense that in religious terms, but Abdul Baha articulates that the distinguishing feature of human beings as opposed to all other beings is the fact that from the beginning that has no beginning, and whatever the form of human beings were spiritual. At no point mutation happened that turned this creature, which was like all other creatures, and turned them spiritual. And that becomes a interesting theological debate about the origin of human beings. But there is a great deal in the Holy Writings, and these are not my interpretations. So this very simple but very profound articulation that this inter-religion tension, animosity, is nothing other than a misunderstanding of the reality of the relationship between God, the Creator, and human beings, I found very, very enlightening. And of course, importantly, and just in case that my illustration causes confusion, Baha'u'llah makes it quite clear that this is not the end. It will continue. And as we grow more and more conscious, so will be more manifestations of God emerging. So this insight has far-reaching implications, a very exciting insight. Exciting in the sense that it, in my view, once and for all, resolved this issue of is it the last one? Is it a superior one? This is actually the wrong question. There is no beginning, there is no end to the process of perfection of human consciousness. And therefore we should rethink, reconceptualize, and redefine religion and go back to a different beginning. The Bab called that the commencement of a cycle of fulfillment, the cycle of unification, a cycle in which the consciousness of humanity, irrespective of their origin, tribal, gender, or any other form, will begin to converge on a different understanding of what our relationship is, what our purpose in life is, and what our responsibility towards our physical reality should be. And the entire web of Baha'i teachings revolves around the creation of this new consciousness that would have a new breed of human beings with a different understanding in that sense. We will evolve to a cycle in which tensions and confrontations, making religious and beliefs as a source of superiority or definition of inferiority, subjugation of one group in the form of religious leaders, defining themselves superior in capability and entitled to pronounce on how others should live, has come to an end. Instead, a new chapter, a new cycle has been ushered in which every human being is capable of communicating, relating to the Creator through reflection, reading, prayers of the manifestations of God. And by cutting out a layer who were intermediaries up to now, which was okay in that cycle, retrospectively, that's where we were. We grew up and we reached an age or stage where our spiritual capabilities have, as species, as human beings, have reached a point of being able to reflect on these matters ourselves, ask those questions, and organize ourselves, and use religion as a means of organizing life on the planet in an inspired, compassionate, and deeply spiritual manner. And never ever again in this cycle, religion will become a source of power control of the masses. There is no room for religious leadership of the individuals. Nobody needs to pray for me. Although everybody can pray on my behalf for my sanity, out of compassion and care, but not because I'm incapable. Nobody should use my resources or expect resources from me because she or he feels more superior. So that layer of religious hierarchy has been removed. Now, if we quickly bring it, since we are at university and I spent many years teaching, bringing to a material example, when you're at first year and second year at schools, they hold your hand, you learn how to shape alphabet. There's a space for that when you're that age. But when you get to the university, they give you a little bit more freedom to go and research. And there are still tutors. The tutors have a role to play. Because you're still at that age that, yes, you can do it independently, but you need a tutorship. But then you get your degree, you get PhD and post-PhD. Well, do you still need tutors? No. We are not criticizing what happened in that cycle because that cycle was a successive requirement of an organic growth of species that needed somebody to hold their hand, somebody pray for them, etc., etc. But now humanity has reached a stage of or approaching the stage of maturity, much like a student that reaches the PhD and post-PhD, you grow and the necessity for it disappears. In this cycle, the cycle of unification of humankind, the necessity of any individual being the intermediary between the individual or another individual and the creator, that has disappeared. But this is not a criticism of the past, so to speak. In fact, it's an understanding of where we are and where we are heading for. In this cycle, in this new cycle, the cycle of unification and fulfillment, a very important part is to recognize, and again there is a fair amount of writings in the holy texts of the Baha'i faith about the notion of ever-advancing civilization. That from the days that our forefathers were in the cave and the hunter-gatherers, and then we became successively located along the rivers where agriculture took place, and the cities emerged, and the city-state emerged, and the notion of nation emerged out of various fighting tribes. And we have now reached a point where the interplay of a spiritual insight and material progress, industrial progress, has brought us to a point that we now got to think not nations. We now have no choice but to think, for the first time, of humankind. Much like a couple of hundred years back, we may belong to a tribe or a region, depending which part of the country, which part of the globe you came, you use a different example. But interesting enough, whichever region you choose, there are some tribes in it, or there used to be. They were the lords who were ruling over their own clan and region. They were kingdoms of some kind or another. But then those tribal affiliations, those regional sentiments and affiliations ultimately coalesced to form the nation. Now the notion of sovereign state, nationality, passport, became a source of pride. Now, Baha'u'llah says time has come for us to think of humankind, the birth of a human being. It's in fact for the first time in the history that we actually understand human beings. Even if the past poets wrote about it and the philosophers talked about it, you and I did not really have a sense for it. But now, if you Google it, you can actually real time see what's happening. You actually believe that Chinese are Chinese and Indians are Indians and Mexicans are Mexican and they look like us. Maybe their colors are a little different, their shapes are a little bit taller or fatter or darker or lighter, but they are human beings much like us. And more importantly, we begin for the first time have affinity for part of us that we don't know and we never meet, and we will never meet. For example, it's a new phenomenon that we sit here and we contribute online to a group who are mobilizing to have orphans taken care of in Bangladesh or protect women's rights in Mexico or in Saudi Arabia. We feel actually affinity with it. Am I right? It's for the first time. We don't know those children, we don't know those women, we don't know those refugees, we don't know those forests, we don't know those species, but we actually suddenly relate to them. And we're prepared to not just relate and say shame or whatever, we actually prepared to contribute to that cause. This is a new phenomenon in the scale that is happening. It doesn't mean that philanthropy didn't exist before, but to relate to the emotions of human beings has brought us to transcend national boundaries. And yes, at the same time, there is a lot of opposite happening. So there are two parallel processes happening. I'll come back to these two parallel processes next session tomorrow. But for the moment, it suffices to say that the birth of the concept of human being is a new phenomenon fundamental to this particular cycle. But this cycle, through its spiritual maturation, begins to also rethink the material existence, the environment in which we live. That we cannot separate our environment. The integrity of environmental variables is as important for us, not just in material terms, but also in spiritual terms. Baha'u'llah says that human beings, by virtue of being the spiritual beings, they have an important responsibility as the trustee of the environment in which we live. So our responsibilities then is not just about pray and be nice and feel good, but it goes beyond that. It goes to extend the spiritual maturity to environmental, material integrity of the environment in which we live. So progress then, in material and in spiritual, they are interrelated. Our existence has got both material and spiritual dimensions. Each one of us, by virtue of being human beings, we need to eat, we need to sleep, we need to be protected, we need to have shelter. And that has its own dynamics, but at the same time, by the virtue of being spiritual beings, we need to continuously work on ourselves to spiritually mature ourselves, make ourselves more sophisticated, and these two interplay. The more spiritual we become, the more we rethink material use. When we are less spiritual, materialism could become the only measure of success, the only means of achievements. And for some, psychologically, the only means of existence. I exist because I've got such a car, such a mansion, such a piece of land, and the bigger my piece of land, the better, the more achievement I have had. But if we rethink it, if we redefine our reality as these two material and then spiritual dimensions, we rethink our own self. Our wants become less, our needs become more important, and our striving in life is to take care of our needs, not our wants. And then we become far more coherent with the environment in which we live. Importantly, therefore, religion has both individual and societal side. It has been the fact ever since we know religion. Religion's always had some social do's and don'ts, and they've got some personal do's and don'ts. But now we have reached to a point where the sophistication of those do's and don'ts become a lot more complicated. They become a lot more personalized and much less dictated by others. In other words, the individual consciousness reaches a point that takes care of its personal, individual sides of spiritual requirements, do's and don'ts, in coherence with and in alignment with the societal dimensions. But as the society evolves, rest assured that the next manifestation of God will change some of these societal sides. But the personal side will remain more and more pretty much stable. Thou shalt not lie, and thou shalt, the 10 Commandments, if you like, or many of the 10 Commandments, but in a much deeper, wider understanding. Shouldn't get too excited and get going. Some very important points, which I'll try to share some relevance of it in next for what we're going through, is an important principle that religion should be in accordance with science. This tension between science and religion, again, Baha'i writings suggest that it is fairly artificial. It's not substantive, in the sense that both religion and science are the two wings on which human progress must fly. And this is just one quotation from, again, Abdul Bahá's talk in Paris, talking to a group of, at that time, atheist socialist society. We are distinctive as creatures insofar as we are intelligent, in the sense that we can, through intellectual inquiry, discover the rules of our existence. We can discover the law of gravity. We can fly. We can go under the sea. We can go deeper. We can create missiles and shoot it. Unfortunately, at the time, or for the time being, for negative, destructive purposes, but it could actually become a positive force if we use the same intelligence. So our intelligence, which has now created sciences which are wonderful for our material existence, should not be pitched against religion. Because as you see here, neither of them, meaning neither religious insights nor scientific insights on their own, can lead to a balanced and coherent progress. We need both of them. And both of them act as check against the other. The second one, which is very exciting, is the fact that humanity on the planet has been subjected to an ever-widening circle of unification. We have come, as I alluded to, and here it's Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, articulates it much better than I could ever, that the organic evolution of mankind has been slow and gradual and involved successively the unification of the family, the tribe, the city, state, and the nation. So has the light vouchsafed by the revelation of God at various stages in the evolution of religion, which religion itself is a revolutionary process, and reflected in the successive dispensations of the past, been slow and progressive. Indeed, the measure of divine revelation in every age has been adapted to and commensurate with the degree of social progress achieved in that age by a constantly evolving humanity. My understanding is that we're never going to stop evolving, either materially or spiritually. And that's a very exciting insight for us to know that it's not the end of the world, it's not the end of progress, it's not as if we have come to discover everything. In fact, the more we discover, the more manifestations of God will reveal more, the more we will become capable of progressing more. And the final point is this very important insight about the current stage of societal evolution, which I alluded to, and again, the unification of the whole of mankind, which is the pivot around which all Baha'i teachings revolves and revolves. Everything that has been revealed, everything that the Baha'is experiment globally and put into practice revolves around one and only one thing, and that is ways and means of the unification of whole humankind. And that is the stage in which you and I go through. We cannot disregard it. We cannot divorce ourselves from it. We are part of it, whether we like it or not. And that's an important, from a societal point of view, where I, as a student of social science, continually ask myself, what is our role now? What should we be doing now? I find this incredibly instructive as to how to use it as an intellectual compass as to what is happening around us. And that, to me, I find it very exciting that at the moment we are going through a transition from the phase of nation building to a phase of human being building. We need to find new rules. The rules of the past do not work for today. The more we try to take the current situation to the past, the more we find them they don't fit. They create tension, friction, And therefore, we need to rethink, we need to recast our mindset first and foremost. And equally importantly, we have to recast our spiritual emotions and energy. We have to reframe the questions in order to be able to find the right answers. And this simple but very profound quotation in the Baha'i writings is very significant and instructive for intellectual inquiry about what should be done. The earth is but one country and mankind is citizens. If we can recast our spiritual, emotional, and intellectual queries towards a simple principle, we'll find new solutions. Because not every question at every point in time is a quite correct question. Very often the question is wrong. And therefore we spend a lot of resources, a lot of energy looking for an answer to a wrong question. The most famous one these days has become a joke is how to make America great again. Well, that's a wrong question. You will spend billions on answering that question and only to realize that you have squandered resources and opportunities because you are in search of an answer for a wrong question. How to make the white more superior in South Africa? That's another wrong question. How to make Europe more dominant? Another wrong question. How to make China prevail? Wrong question. Right? And you get the drift of what I'm saying. So we need to align our spiritual entity with our intellectual inquiry, because one curbs the type of questions that we ask. Is it not? Because the spiritual being, our ethical framework, defines what questions are the right questions. And when we ask the right questions with the guide of our spiritual compass, if you like, then our intellectual capability is there to serve us to find the right answers. And this is, in my understanding, how the Baha'i faith reframes religion, redefines civilization, and reestablishes the technical relationship between one source of insight and inspiration and creativity with another, and creates an alignment. So religion, instead of becoming a source of division, enmity, destruction, animosity, becomes a force, an inspiration, an insight for creating an environment in which the earth is but one country and mankind is citizens. In the next lectures, I'll try to break down this and take it a bit more detailed into the conditions in which our civilization is traversing at the moment, and share with you my understanding of how different teachings that Baha'u'llah has brought guides different problems that we experience. This is the helicopter view. We'll get on the earth, deal with some of the practicalities in the next session. But if there are any comments, questions, more than happy to listen.
Does the Baha'i faith believe that one is born good with correctly ethical practice, or
born with original sins?
To get my head around the Christian idea that one is born in sin.
Yeah.
Original sin, to me, I can't grasp that.
The Baha'i writings is quite explicit on that every human being has been born as a clean sheet, as a soul unadulterated, with full capacities. In fact, the Baha'i writing says, consider the human soul as a mine full of gems of inestimable value. So far from being born with sins or burdened with sins, a human soul at the time of conception is a reservoir of jewels of inestimable value. However, whether we will be able to unlock it, whether we will be able to unearth these gems, depends upon a number of factors. First and foremost, the degree to which we individuals exert efforts in mining the inestimable value. So first and foremost, the responsibility is placed on human souls to be in search of exploring your God-given gems of inestimable value. And of course, in that journey, the role of parents is absolutely paramount, but not the only factor. So the Bahá'í writings then takes an organic view of what God has created as a clean sheet of angelic mine of inestimable value, which then entrusted with the parents who need to nurture this. Their influence is important, but it's not the only one. The society is important. And therefore, instead of having a monolithic, you are condemned to hell or heaven, it says, no, the progress of that clean soul depends upon 3-4 factors. Parents are important. They have a divine responsibility to take care of and nurture this soul. Society is important, but ultimately it's the individual's effort, the degree to which we try to understand ourselves and, in the context that I mentioned earlier, to interplay with our Creator. At no point we will be forsaken. At no point will God abandon us. Far from it. We will become the magnet of divine blessings by the degree to which we exert effort in refining ourselves. I don't know if that answers your question.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Going back to yesterday, how did the Bab be recognized as a manifestation of the Creator? Christ and Moses both supposedly did miracles. They may or may not have done. But what did the Bab do that made people feel that he was really a manifestation of the Creator?
That was his miracle. He attracted souls who were both highly educated, highly authoritative in their theological beliefs and schooling, as well as very so-called commoners who were attracted to his message.
So it was done by messages rather than deeds.
But when Christ bumped into Peter, the fisherman,
Yes.
he did not perform any miracles. He looked into the eyes of Peter, and Peter said, I follow you. Because when you look at the sun, you don't need miracle to tell you that the sun is shining and is bright and warm. You look at it and it say, this is sun. In fact, it's too bright, it's too overwhelming. Is it not? So when Christ meets Peter, Peter does not need a miracle. And it doesn't, I'm not for a moment suggesting that Christ was not capable of performing miracles. Not at all.
Relevant. Okay.
Yeah? So manifestations of God, they are beings that their very existence attracts. A magnet does not perform miracle to pick up a pin or a nail, even if it's covered in a mist. The magnet's creativity essence is to attract other metals, is it not? Okay. So the miracle of Christ was not that he made the dead to arise or seek to heal, which he did, and I believe he could do more. The miracle of Christ was that when he said, I am, people believed it. Why they did it? Don't ask them. I wasn't there. That's the prophets of that. Those beings that I mentioned, they are manifestations of God. They are such a perfect mirror of the love of God that their love itself is a miracle.
There is essentially very charismatic in the sort of terms that we might use.
You may use charismatic. Baha'u'llah says that there are different categories of souls. Although they may have 2 hands, 2 eyes, 1 head, and 2 legs, they are not human beings. They are a categories of soul whose very essence is the embodiment of what we human beings call it miracle. In other words, when they talk, their word has got a different, I use the same word, Moses used the same word, but they have different influence. Because I'm a mortal human being, Moses is a different category of souls, and so on and so forth. So I don't think in human language of any of the languages that human beings have created, there is a term that can define manifestations of God. We do the best we can, charismatic, some of them say they're overwhelming, some of them they are miraculous, all of them are correct, because we don't have a term to define them. Baha'u'llah says that there are various kingdoms on this existence. There is mineral, there is vegetable, there is animal, there are human beings, there are manifestations of God, and there is God. These are different realms of existence. The same way that vegetable, however beautiful, however fragrant, they can never ever understand animals or human beings. The same way that however dolphins clever might be, or other elephants may be powerful, they can never understand human beings because they belong to that kingdom. By the same force, by the same rules, we human beings, however clever we might be, however imaginative, poetic we might be, we will never understand the manifestations of God. And never mind God. God is the unknowable essence. The manifestations of God are a categories of existence, a categories of kingdom that have capability of reflecting in full glory the attributes of God. That is their miracle. The Bab did not have any audience with any crowd. He would only write. What was in his writings that suddenly a granny got up and said, I believe that you are the promised one? Or authoritative Ayatollah who had spent 40, 50 years of his life to have his own school of thoughts and had followers, would get a piece of the writings of the Bab and the next thing would say, no, I believe you are a manifestation of God, I haven't met you. Or what did he have, the Bab, who a woman called Tahara had a dream, never met the Bab. In her dream, she saw the Bab and said, I believe you are a manifestation of God. I don't know, but that's the miracle.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? If not, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you.